Hello and welcome to Hope and Consciousness. So it's day 8 of my 14-day challenge to help you have a spiritual and awakening moment. So I've talked a lot in the past couple of days about some of the scientific side of things, like the quantum physics. And that was quite important for me because it helped get that understanding that some of these things that I was seeing in the spiritual documents and texts and all these miraculous things that I'd started to see in even that very first book I read, that it could actually be possible, and science was actually backing up that that could actually, happen. So that was quite crucial for me to start to sort of open my eyes and go, okay, there's actual evidence now sort of agreeing with some of these things. As I've found out more and more, even more recently, it's just, if you look back at some of the ancient stuff, it's just mind-blowing, some of the things that they were talking about back then. And I think in many ways the modern history book that we're taught in school should just be thrown out the window in many ways once you start going beyond a couple of thousand years back. So anyway, that led me on to an interesting event that I ended up going to as a result of a property conference that I went to for my business side of things. So they had a speaker on the stage, a guy called Ryan Pinnock, and he was talking about, why things like the law of attraction isn't working for you. And, initially it was aimed at the money side of things. It's like, why haven't you got all the money and all the happiness and the wealth and the things like that you want in your life? And he's like, you can do affirmations till you're blue in the face. But he's saying, at a deep down level, would a multi-millionaire really sit there and do affirmations about, I've got lots of money? No, he wouldn't. He'd just look at his bank account and kind of know that I've got that money. So it's a different sense of different feeling, if you know what I mean. So his talk kind of really intrigued me. So as a result of that, I decided to go to his one-day free kind of workshop. And then from his one-day workshop, he talks about why we do things, the nature of our emotions and other aspects that I really sort of got in tune with a little bit. So I thought, okay, let's take the plunge, and I signed up for his 2-day sort of weekend event. And I can't really stress how bizarre that event was, really, compared to what you might be thinking some sort of workshop or something like that might be. Absolutely bizarre in a really great way. So yeah, his brand's called Super Genius, and it's a chap called Ryan Pinnock. Please do check him out. But basically, going through the 2-day event, he starts to talk about following your gut and your intuition, really. And when you really let go and totally trust that your intuition has got your back. And it went quite deep into it, to the point where you actually do practical exercises with a group of complete strangers, and he kind of proves the point to you during these practical exercises that we have in ourselves this innate, abilities that we just lost touch with over here in the Western world. And it's quite fascinating, it really is. So to describe it, basically we were sitting around in a group of there was 4 of us in total. So it was myself, a lady who was pregnant at the time, and an older lady with her son there, Indian lady with her son. And it was quite fascinating. So you go through a process of basically almost like running out of things to say. You're going to do a process where you're sort of saying, what's obvious to me about your genius is, and you just pick up the thing that comes to your mind, and you just kind of keep running with it. And in a weird way, when you run out of stuff to say, that's when you start ignoring your imagination that's plucking all things out of the air, and you start to tap into this sort of innate human intuition that we have. I mean, you see it with wildlife and animals and things like that all the time, where they predict days in advance things like earthquakes, natural disasters, and things like that. You can even look at it at some of the tsunami that it happened on Boxing Day a few years back, where the wildlife left the area days beforehand. There was very little wildlife damage from you would expect mass swathes of, birds and other animals and things to be wiped out, but it just doesn't happen that way, because they're kind of in tune with nature and in tune with their own intuition. So what he does, he goes through a process. He shows you a process of how to try and get in touch with all of this. So we're sitting there in a group trying to do this, going around between each person in turn, basically trying to point out what it is that we're feeling using our intuition about the person. And it's not just about what their current situation is, it's also about the future. So, I mean, I picked up various different things, like with the lady who was pregnant at the time. It just kind of popped into my head that you're stuck in a weird dichotomy of, wanting to be out in nature, outside in the country, but you're stuck still in the city, and you desperately kind of want to get out there and leave the city and just sort of follow your own pursuits, really. And yeah, there was loads of other details that kind of came across with all of that stuff. And at the end of it, the person confirms or sort of what was accurate and what wasn't, and it was pretty much spot on. Virtually all of the stuff was spot on. It's weirdly surprising and freaky. I mean, I was picking up with the Indian lady, for example, that she had someone back in India that she was helping a child, and all to do with sort of food and cooking and things like that. And then at the end of it, she said, yes, she actually sponsors 2 children in India and pays for all of their basically food and livelihood, so that they don't have to worry about that growing up. And it's just like really fascinating stuff. Picked up lots of different aspects with it. And then we'll get to the stuff they picked up about me, which was freaky as well. So, bear in mind the previous video, I told you I had started to look in privately, in my spare time, looking at this stuff about contacting extraterrestrials, using consciousness, meditation and things like that. And I'd only just started to scratch the surface of it, really. I'd probably done about 3 or 4 sort of meditations at that point, trying to have an experience of some sort of contact. Up until that point, it was just me doing it while I'm, before I go to sleep. So I wasn't sitting out under the stars or anything and doing it at that point. And, for a complete bunch of strangers to start talking about this, it's not the sort of thing you would randomly pick up from, just people in the street, if you know what I mean. So, yeah, the lady who was pregnant, pretty much, she was just like, I'm getting that you're being contacted by beings from another world. And I'm just like, excuse me, what? But it's getting it becomes overwhelming, and you have to use sound and things like that to do it. And she kept on into more details about how I'm meant to be a healer of this world, and different aspects as well. The Indian lady picked out literally exactly as she just pictured me sitting in front of my computer most days, which is pretty much what I do for the business side of things quite a lot of the time. And it was spookily accurate. And this is just from someone using their gut feeling. But to actually pick up on, oh, this guy's trying to contact, aliens, you just wouldn't see someone down the, out in public and go, that guy, he looks like he's trying to use the power of his mind to contact aliens. I'm just like, wow. Of all the things to pick up, and bearing in mind we've had no prior discussion, where literally you literally pick complete strangers, you sit with them and you do this exercise. So that was like the first day, blew me away. I had a similar sort of repeat experience on the second day. This time didn't focus on that, but on a more personal front about dilemmas in my life, and similar thing resonating with the other people as well. I was picking up stuff from them. It's almost like once you get rid of the imagination side of things, you then just let it flow out of you, and you get better and better at doing this. It's surprising how fast, you know, we're complete novices at this, never tried it before. So if we can be that accurate with, you know, novices really, it just really goes to show you what abilities we have within ourselves. I mean, looking at the extraterrestrial stuff, yeah, Dr. Greer talks about, you know, the remote viewing programs, and that's something I'm, you know, actively going to be probably reading up on and looking into, because that was studied by, you know, the American military, and it's been proved time and time again that that stuff exists. They regularly use it for covert operations and things like that to spy on situations. So it's quite impressive. But the end of the first day also kind of blew me away a little bit. So as well as going through this intuition exercise, you then do a thanking exercise where you, and it's something that's quite unusual over here in the West, a bit more probably over in the East. You literally do an exercise where you bow down to someone and sort of almost like thank and worship them. And it's really an odd experience, because you don't ever get that kind of feeling in everyday life, or probably, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I've ever experienced a feeling like that really. It's quite strange. You basically go through a process of getting eye contact with someone, going through sort of acknowledging them, and then one of you is going to go down and kind of effectively bow and sort of almost like worship to the other person, but just kind of being loving and thankful, if you know what I mean. You're not actually, you know, like worshipping them in that sort of religious sense or anything like that. And it's a really bizarre feeling when a complete stranger just comes up and gets down on their knees in front of you and sort of like, yeah, is really loving towards you, and then you do the same to someone else. Unbelievable thing. And at the end of the whole experience, what he has is he has you do it to yourself as well. So you get down on the floor and you almost go into a little meditation in a kneeling position. And yeah, for me, that people talk about how when you get lots of people together trying meditation and things like that, you kind of get this conscious field that occurs around the situation. You know, the more people are present trying to do the same thing, the greater the effect, because it's sort of resonating in this field that we're not aware of. And yeah, it really was something like that. I had this huge experience of basically shooting, you know, becoming this being of light and just shooting up into space, just sort of almost standing in orbit, a bit like the moon, with the Earth being this sort of angelic light being, and then almost growing in size to the point where I can literally wrap my arms around the Earth and just hug the whole Earth and just sort of beam love back at the entire Earth. And I was just like, whoa, that's it's a hugely loving experience when you have something like that. And it was me giving the love as well. Yeah, unbelievable. It kind of left me a bit speechless that day, to be honest with you. I did speak to Ryan briefly, you know, the guy that was running the thing about it, and he was like, yeah, that's kind of, you're tapping into, you know, God consciousness stuff there. But he's like, I can't really call it that because, you know, people wouldn't like any religious connotations of it, but that's the same thing, source, God, and all that, the unconditional loving feeling that you're sort of tapping into there. I just found it absolutely amazing, and it, yeah, that kind of initial event blew me away. Some of the volunteers there that were helping as well, and the sort of staff going around doing it and telling me some of their experiences as well, amazing. I was there with a friend of mine, Julie, and her sort of partner at the time, and yeah, they've had interesting experiences as well. So yeah, quite bizarre, I have to say. Yeah, so that kind of really opened my eyes up to a different kind of loving state, and it was the first example that I've actually had myself of using this sort of intuition inbuilt into us. You know, we all get these gut feelings from time to time that I should not like do this right now. There's something that you know, I shouldn't do that. And then lo and behold, you find out, gosh, I just missed like an accident or something along those lines. But we almost ignore those in everyday society. We're so busy doing things that we don't listen to those feelings very much. So yeah, that was really the first eye-opener of experiencing that intuitive sort of state myself. And this is the thing I've seen in many things, even with the kind of extraterrestrial contact side of things, that, you know, you can see lights in the sky, you know, on TV and in the movies and things like that. And it's for most people in the West, it's probably never going to convince them. But if you've actually gone and sat down and done a little meditation yourself, actively trying to contact these people, these beings, and then almost in response to that, you get a sighting or something along those lines, or you have an experience yourself in person where you have some either supernatural thing or, you know, contact with something else, or even just, yeah, some kind of strange meditation, sort of lucid dream state, it starts to become real for you. And you start to realize that we do have this enormous potential within us that is just so untapped over here in our busy lives that we never look at it. So that was really a huge eye-opener for me. So I do highly recommend it. And I did go to one of his follow-up events, which I'll go into a bit more detail as well, because that was all about sort of why we do things, emotional mastery and things like that. And again, that one just blew me away absolutely as well. More examples of using this intuition in different ways as well. Yeah, so that's me for day 8. Sorry, it's quite a long one, but it was quite a huge experience to have, to be honest with you. To have complete strangers just almost look into your life and get things virtually completely right. You know, we've all heard of psychics and, you know, their abilities to do things, and people laugh it off most of the time and things like that. But, you know, when you're actually doing it yourself and picking up things yourself about people, and I'm not talking general things. That's the key thing. I'm not talking about, you know, that some of the horoscope stuff, which can be very generalized to things. I'm talking specific details. Like I remember at the second event I went to, I was literally going, yeah, your kitchen counter is white. You've got an island in the middle. There's like a bottle of wine here and there. And I'm not describing a person's kitchen, having this through this intuitive experience. And at the end of it, she's like, that is my kitchen. You just described exactly what my kitchen is like. And I'm just like, it's just freaky, man. So yeah, that's the first freaky stage. So yeah, do check him out. A chap called Ryan Pinnock. I highly recommend his courses. Super Genius is the brand. Yeah, but hopefully see you tomorrow for day 9. Cheers.